Hi there, welcome back. This video gonna focus on client push installation for Configuration Manager client. So we worked in the previous lectures about the configuration and installation, even manual client installation also we worked. Now it's time for us to deploy Microsoft Configuration Manager client with the client push option. So let me maximize my configuration. So as you can see here, to configure the client push, you can go back to administration and navigate to sites and click on in the ribbon button client installation settings. So this is where you should be able to configure client push as well as the software update point-based client installation. These two configurations you should be able to do it from a client push. So I should be able to configure here within these three tabs. This is an easy way. However, I wanted to cover the pre-required configuration that needs to be available on the target machines. Let me try to give you some introduction about the client push. So what would happen is from a configuration manager server, the CCMSetup.exe file will be remotely sent to these machines within your network. So let's say you might have maybe an example in this case, hundreds of machines. On all those machines, it will first copy it and then it will trigger some command line. So now there are few couple of to copy and trigger. These are the steps, an easy way to explain, right? Verbally, but in the back end you need to have some kind of pre-requirements. So let me talk about those pre-requirements. So if you see here, I mentioned here very detail at the high level of the configuration. So the first one would be the administrative rights. So on this machine, that is on the remote machine, on this machine, you need to have a admin rights to copy, right? The CCMSetup.exe file to copy, you need to have the permission. So that means you need to configure somewhere some kind of account. We call this as a client push installation account. So this account to be configured within the ConfigMgr server so that it can copy by using that account. Next thing would be the firewall ports. So the firewall ports, definitely if you want to copy, means it is actually working on file share, right? So it's basically trying to copy from one machine to another machine. How do you do? Normally you enter the computer name and then, for example, this is the file server example case, file server backslash maybe $, or the share name, right? This is how you open. So basically this works with a protocol called SMB. Okay, so SMB protocol required a port called 445. Port should be open. So SMB stands here, a file and print services, I would say, or server message block. But in this case, 445 is needed for file and print sharing related. So this has to be open on the target machine firewall, meaning it's good to configure a single group policy on all of these machines. Am I correct, right? So it's better to have a GPU. So we listed one is the client push account, and the second one would be the GPU. We talked about it now for enabling the SMB port related, right? So also it also needs other ports like 135 for RPC, that is the remote procedure call, and also UDP port for your name resolution, that is 137 and 138. So these are the couple of ports also needed. So just in case if you are using a kind of a port list, then you might have to use these all the ports. But again, the numbers, that is a 27, 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4, of course, you also need the 04 also, 2704. All these ports are needed for this is a 270 related. All these four ports are related to the remote control application. So let's say if you're not working with the remote control, you might not need to opening these ports. But if you're trying to push the client within your network, on all those target machines, these ports should be open. At least 445, 135, 137, 138 should be opened. Okay, friends. In fact, these ports will be normally opened everywhere in every company by default. But there could be some kind of companies that might not be open. So in that situation you might have to request if you are using the client push method. Now let's talk about other configuration. You need to have the DNS resolution, like because why we are talking about the name resolution is like if you want to communicate with your management point or distribution point, so it will communicate over the FQDN name, so that name have to be resolved. Similarly, the target machines also should have a proper name resolution should be there. So that means on all these machines you should be able to have a proper name resolution. Now let's talk about other configuration. So to use a client push, you need to have, if you learn out of this video, subscribe to this channel. Subscribing won't cost you a coin, but it has extreme value to me. Subscribing may seem very small to you, but its impact is more on me. It's a vote of confidence that keeps me excited about creating more fresh, insightful content when you subscribe. Subscribing is a win-win situation. You ask any question or post any questions in the comments. As a new thread, you would be getting within 10 minutes a response back. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. Subscribe. To use the client push, you need to have already completed the discovery methods. So if you do not have a discovery method already configured, it cannot work for you, right? Because you don't discover the objects, there is no objects within your collection, then you cannot deploy on those devices. So it only works client push if the objects are available in your all systems collection, then only it will be push would work ultimately. Okay, so this is the one of the requirement. So as you know that for the manual installation you don't need any discovery methods, so we did cover that part. But for client push you need to have the discovery method should be already configured, and system discovery should be enabled, then only it would work for us. And the WMI must be in a working state on the client machine. So how do you test it is, you could open up your run and webbeam test, and simply if you're trying to connect, if you're able to connect to this, so that means on that machine the WMI is properly connecting. Okay, so this is one other method to connect, and there are multiple ways that you to verify on the target machine we have a WMI properly enabled or not. Okay, now let's also talk about other configurations on the client machines. The target machines must be part of your boundaries and boundary groups, otherwise definitely it cannot get the site code, so the installation shouldn't work properly. So that's why you need to configure a proper boundaries, and these machines should be able to access without any kind of network access protection policies, or there should not be any kind of routing issues, or these things should not be configured. So basically ultimately you need to look for your network segment or routing issues, all of that. The machines must be communicating with your configuration manager server, and a normal file and copy process should work. Then if that's going to work, then the network is fine. So if no interfaces from antivirus or security softwares, because sometimes it's not exactly the sometimes, I would say always we have to configure some of the antivirus exclusions for every product. So even for base Windows operating system also there are some folders that Microsoft recommends to exclude. Same thing applies for configuration manager also. You must have to exclude couple of configuration manager specific antivirus exclusions to be configured. Just in case if you do not configure also, it will work. However, it might cause some kind of performance issues, or later point it might cause some kind of content mismatch issues may come up. Just in case if you want to learn about what kind of software exclusions needs to be configured for your configuration manager, just visit this URL. You would be having all the details. So ideally this is gonna website, it's gonna open. You might have to configure all these exclusions as per Microsoft recommendations. Otherwise, your application may not work properly. That is your configuration manager. So on a client machine, all these folders should be excluded. Now, when it comes to the other point, when we talk about the client push installation settings, let's say assume that you have you pushed might be hundreds of computers, right? So what if it is failing, right? So let's say within this entire infrastructure, you are pushing from a configuration manager to hundreds of computers, but you don't know why the software is failing. When I say software, SCCM client is getting failed. It is trying to push, but it is failing on the client machine. So client is, you are able to copy, you are able to execute, but it was failed with example case, disk space is low, or WMI corrupted, or maybe does not have a permission, okay, or there's a communication issue or name resolution issue to contact the management point, or maybe boundaries are not configured. So there could be multiple issues might come up, right, my friends? So we don't know what kind of error or what kind of reason it was failing, right? So to address this, there is a new role is available called FSP. So that's called the fallback status point. So we call it FSP in short. So what happens is any machine that is failing to install the client, it will end with some error code, right? So it will attach that error code information plus the machine name, and it will send that information to FSP server. So FSP will automatically record that information, and it will give you in the report saying that, hey, so maybe 10 machines failed because of the low disk space, maybe another 15 machines got failed because of some kind of basic pre-required software. For example, the machines are not formatted with NTFS, or maybe access problem or communication problem. So all of that would be properly listed, and we will have some kind of report. That's why, my friends, always try to use the FSP. So we did not configure FSP. So now our configuration steps would be, the first one would be to configure your firewall ports with the GPO, and then second one would be the discovery methods we have already configured, client push account to be configured. So let me list here, maybe that would be easy to remember for you. So this is the firewall ports is the first one. We call this as a GPO. Second thing would be the client push account, the account that should have a permissions on these machines, right? So this is the second one we are going to configure. And antivirus exclusions you may configure by checking this URL. And the third important one would be the enabling the FSP role. So we would enable FSP role. This is the third step, which I would consider into the monitoring point of view for or troubleshooting point of view. So that being said, now we know what are the things to be configured. So let's go back to ConfigMgr server. But before that, let's think that first configuring the GPO, right? So let's go back to your Active Directory and configure your GPO. So I have already opened Group Policy Management Console. Just in case if you don't know, go to the Administrative Tools on your domain controller and click on Group Policy Management, and this console gets open. And within this, you could create a multiple group policies. So by default, you might have already default domain policy and default domain controller policy. So in my case, I'm going to clicking a new policy called SCCM network roles. So this is going to allow maybe file services specific, right? So I would simply open up, edit this rule. At this point of time, this is not linked to any of the location. You can see in the scope section, this is not linked to anybody. Let's first configure and link up. So I would configure here under computer policies because we wanted to apply this to all computers. So I would ensure that it gets applied for computer based, and within this Windows specific security and file, that is Windows Defender with advanced rules. So this is where I would create it, or you could actually create all the rules on one of the computer and import it. But in my case, I'm going to enable this rule by creating one by one. For example, file and print services I said earlier. So just click on this file and print sharing. This is going to enable all the required ports. If you just go exclusively, you would be understanding the ports are related to the 137, 138, 445 and 139. All these are the file and print service specific ports. Now as a next step, I'm going to enable additional ports that are related to ConfigMgr, which is in this case custom port number I'm going to give. The port is TCP port 27012 2704. All these ports I wanted to allow on basically on a domain policy, allow SCCM remote control ports. So these ports are useful for remote control specific. That's why I have opened. And in case if you want to configure WMS specific, predefined can be used. For example, in this case, WMI management, so remotely it can connect to the remote machines. So we enabled all the relevant ports now. So that being said, all the required ports are now enabled. Let's close this and link it. So to link this, I wanted to link at the India region, also EU region. I wanted to link it. So I'll simply click on link an existing policy, SCCM network rules. Let's say if you have a couple of permissions on EU region also, you can link the same policy just like this. And on the target machine, now the post gets applied by running the GP update /force, or you could wait maybe another 5-10 minutes time. So that's how it's going to apply this ports. So once we created the GPO to allow the required ports configuration on the target machine, the second one would be the account configuration. We'll come to the second configuration, but instead I would like to configure first FSP. So let's go to configuration manager server. In this case, this is the domain controller. Let me switch back. So this is the server. Within this server, I would open up all the sites and site system roles. There are multiple roles that you have, so I'm going to enable additional role, add site system roles by going into administrator or administration. Click on it. Now here click on next. These are the normal things. Now this is where the role should be enabled. So I need to select that role. So as I said, FSP is fallback status point. If you read here, it's going to help you to monitor client installation and identify the clients that are unmanaged because they cannot communicate with their management point for some reason. We don't know what was that reason. It would help you out if you go back to the reports. So simply enable all of this. So what would happen is in the backend, I did very in-depth explain in the past. If you remember, it actually gonna enable some kind of component. In this case, you can simply open up SMS underscore FSP fallback status point specific component gets created. Along with that, there would be additional log file also gets created. So I'll simply go to the location FSP setup. See FSP MGR now just got created this. So this is gonna log got just created, meaning the component also gets created in a minute or so within this. So you see here fallback status point, it is just got created, and with this specific log file is nothing but the FSP-MGR. So it is easy to remember the log file names, and you could see here FSP MSI.log is nothing but the installation related log file, and this is the FSP configuration log file. Now we have the FSP. Now it's time for us to use the FSP. How do you use this FSP is the key. So if you remember in the past, we actually used a command line. If you could recall, during the manual installation we used CCMSetup.exe and then SMS site code either equal into auto, or you give the site code name as lab example. This is what we use. Now it's time for us to use the FSP also type it after this. So just in case if you're trying to install manually, you might have to give here FSP equivalent the FQDN or the server name. So in my case, if I want to give the FQDN, I would use the complete FQDN name of my configuration manager server wherever I install this FSP role. So how do I find? I could go to the administration, and you see here FSP role is already installed on this computer, and this is the FQDN of the computer. So I would give this as the name. So just imagine if you're trying to install manually, you would be using the command line as this, like FSP equivalent. If you're using auto, again command is remains same, it doesn't change, FSP equivalent this. So now why I'm talking about the manual, all of this stuff is because on your client push configuration you have to mention this configuration. So what I will do is I'll go to the administration, I'll select the site name, and now inside the client installation settings, click on client push. So before we push, what is that command it is going to use? So it's going to use SMS site code equivalent lab. So we don't want that. We also need FSP equivalent, the FSP name also we wanted to give. That's it. You apply this so that from now onwards, if any client that you want to push it, it will use this command line. It's easy to remember, right, my friends? So now if you go back to our explanation, I did talked about three things, right? One is a GPU we have done. Now we also configured FSP specific configuration. Now it's time for us to configure the client push installation account. Why we need? Because to push the software on this machine, it needs a permission, right? This computer can go and communicate to target machine, but it needs some kind of permission. So the permission can be granted for a computer account, which is risky these days. So nobody grants a computer account permissions. Instead, they create a service account, and they will ensure that that account will have a permissions on all of these target machines as a local admin. However, that account they will restrict for the logon purpose because it's a service account. So service account are normally do not allow to log on. So that's how we are going to configure. So for that, if you just go back to the same window, that is nothing but your administration sites, and you have selected in the ribbon home client installation methods and client push method, and in the account section within this tab you have to configure a new account. So in my case, if at all I have a new account, for example, let me find out, I really don't recall. So if I just browse as SVC, if I have any of the account, for example, I have the SQL service account. Okay, similarly, if I have another account that has a permission on my remote computers, so you have to just create and set a group policy and grant permissions on all those computers as a local admin. Okay, just in case if you want to learn that, you can Google that, but in my case I wanted to use in this case as the administrator account, because this account has a full permission on all of that remote computers. So I would simply enter the required permissions for this account. Okay, and you might have a question, hey, can I configure multiple accounts? Yes, you can configure multiple accounts, because in your network you might have multiple type of computers. Maybe one account can work on this set of business unit, but it might not applicable, or it might not work for this set. So it is possible that's why you can configure multiple accounts. So it would validate whether it has the permission or not on the remote machine, and then it would push out. So we did configure now installation properties. We did configure the account that is going to use it. That's good. Now the actual client push installation properties, we are going to work on it. So as I said previously, the first one of the main pre-requirement is the network. We have done that configuration. However, just check about the discovery method. So in my case, the system discovery method is already enabled and configured, so that I should be able to see all the machines here. So if you see here, there are these two machines who are available without the client, and this machine got already client installed, but it is in offline. How would I know offline? Because the machine is showing here into tick mark in not in a green state. So if it is a green state, that means the machine is online. If you don't see any green, you don't get it because there's no client software, so you don't know whether the machine is online or offline. So in this case, definitely the machines, we wanted to push it on these two machines. So how do I push it is, either if I want to push it on a single machine, right click and say install client. Okay, this would use the steps like, next it's gonna use the software binaries from this machine, and in case if the client is already installed, it's going to reinstall. Before that, it's going to uninstall and reinstall. And you want to install even on a domain controller, then you must have to select this option if the target machine is a domain controller, and then summary, and it's going to install. How it's going to use installation is, it's going to use this account and it's going to use this command line. But the question is, I'm just canceling here, my friends. If you see, I'm just canceling. So this is going to work if you do it like this. Okay, if I click on install client, it's going to work. But are you going to monitor continuously and right click and next and install? No, we don't want to do that step, right? What we wanted is, if anybody onboarded a new machine to Active Directory, when we onboard, if a new user joined, so we granted a new computer, so that machine might not have a SCCM client. Of course, what we do is, all the machines will have the automatically client gets installed. We will incorporate it in the image as process of OS build itself. We will install the client that has a different process which we talk about during the operating system deployment. But now think that it's a new user, does not have a SCCM client. What we do, we would join that machine to the domain, and discovery process would start here as per the schedule. In this case, every 15 minutes, because we queried for entire domain, and the polling schedule is configured as interval for 15 minutes. Within 15 minutes, it will go and check for the any new machine is available, and once the machine is available, it will come and it will put up inside the all systems collection. And next, what would happen is, since you have already configured the client push account, in this case here the client push account was configured, and also the commands are already available here, what it's going to do is, it will automatically push it when, if these options, look at this, so these options, any of these options are meeting. So let's understand what are these options. So first thing, hey, do you want to enable automatic site-wide clients? No matter whatever it is, automatically it will push the client software. This is what you wanted, right? So any user onboarded, and it will discover, and then it will come to the collection, and then it will automatically install the client. That's what we wanted. And now, if the site server is unable to authenticate using the Kerberos, it's going to use NTLM connection if you want to use the NTLM. But you can also ignore, in this case, system types. So I don't want to install client software maybe on servers. Then I would take out this checkbox. If you consider all these checkboxes, meaning you're going to install automatically, this is automatic site-wide client installation, is going to happen on all the servers and all the workstations, and also on all the SCCM servers. Yes, my friends, by default, SCCM servers also do not have a client software. So don't get confused. If you remember, we install ConfigMgr on this server. This is nothing but your the server which we are logged in, right? INHYDCM01. This is the same server, but there's no client software. You see here, there's no client software, meaning it has a server software, but it doesn't have a client software. So that's why, my friends, always we might have to configure properly whether you want configure even a client also. So that information we would choosing here, so that it also manages on its own also, or some other server can be managed this, right? All these possible options are available. So in my case, I'm going to click here, configuration manager site server, also install the SCCM client or ConfigMgr client. Now it's time for us for other options. So what it's going to do is, hey, specify whether to install a, we did mention here server. So server can be a file server or SharePoint server or maybe mail server or a file server. But is a server also a domain controller, right? So do you want to even install and manage the domain controllers? If so, you have to come back here. So if you choose never, so it's not never going to push on a domain controllers unless you specified manually like this. So install client, this is a DC, next, and you choose here this checkbox, then it will install. So this is a manual method. How many domain controllers you will have? Very few, right? That's why this option is recommended, never configure. But just in case if you want to push even for domain controllers, you would be choosing this option. That's it. So that way it would be automatically pushing the client binaries. Okay, so now let's click on apply. What will happen as soon as I click on apply? Let me explain before apply. Okay, so as you know, SCCM configuration manager or the ConfigMgr works based on the components. So there is a new component will be available. So every component will have its own inboxes, if you remember, right? So within the inboxes, CCR files, this is a CCR.box. So within this, client installation file request will be coming up here. That's called the CCR file will come. So let's actually click on apply. Before apply, again I wanted to show you some other logs also. You see here there is nothing file called ccm.log file. Oh, you have this file, that's good. Okay, let's open and see. So we did configured, but there is nothing was mentioned at this point of time because we have not enable all those settings, right? These settings we have not yet applied. That's why it's not even processing. If you see here, CCR box in process, in proc, that is in process. That is, let's go to that. I told you earlier it is CCR inside the inboxes. So ConfigMgr inboxes, CCR.box within this in process. So within this, some files has to come up. So what it contains is, it consists of some file with the target machine name and the content where it has to copy. We'll try our best to have a look on that. Why I said best is because it's a milliseconds time, so it's very hard to you can copy in a lab environment. If you have a multiple hundreds of machines, then you might get a chance to before it process, you could have a look on it. But that's fine for us. Now let's actually apply this. So before I apply, I wanted to let you know that I have switched off almost all the computers except this machine, the current configuration manager, and the domain controller. Why is because I wanted to show you the log, which is this is this ccm.log file. So this log file, it will show you on a success machine as well as a failed machine in a different way, because I wanted to show you that. That's why I have turned off Windows 11 machine, which we are going to use it for client push also. So I would simply apply. So if you remember, we have configured all these configuration. So that means servers, workstations, ConfigMgr servers, also domain controllers gets automatically installed. Apply. Okay, boom, that's it. Now what would happen? It will wait for another 30 minutes to look for the CCR box to get some kind of file. So now the file got created automatically. If you see here, the queue has been changed little bit. Okay, so the files comes up here in a minute, and it's gonna push it. So if you see here little bit, this space, it is talking about here FSP command line, all of that. So why I was open is this one. So we would see in a minute the automated client installation push would happen. So this might take a really couple of minutes. You might have a question, can I force it? Yes, you could do it from the components by simply going into the configuration manager, service manager, and you could look for client ConfigMgr. So this is the one. Query might be the component is in a sleep state or is running. Okay, that's good. So it might be already started. If you see here, let's copy and paste it. Yeah, we got this file. So let me tell you. So if you see here, the file got automatically processed also from in process. So but I copied successfully this file so that I can really show you. You all are so fortunate in the lab. So let's see. Oh, this has been already empty file. So It was actually it was about to have, but unfortunately this file has automatically deleted even that content, so it's not even written the full content. In between we copied. That's okay. We will go back to the ConfigMgr log file. That's a CCM log file. So let's have a look on it. So here in the incoming, there's a one file got created in a queue, inhydcm01 file, and this one file it is gonna process. So how it is going to process, if you read here a little bit, forget about these reds, okay, but focus on here. It is attempting to connect to administrative share, which is admin dollar. So on a remote computers, you need to have a admin dollar, right? If you do not have, it won't work. And if you see here, it is trying with administrator account, that what we have configured in the client push account. So this is where we configure the client push account. So this account is using. So this is a log file, and it is try to authentication is success, and then it is gonna copy. In the second attempt it was successful. It is trying to copy. Even IPC dollar share also there. All the dollar shares are required, and it would copy the files. Now if you see here, it is just copying MobileClient.tcf file as well as from i386 CCMSetup.exe file. These two files it is dropping in C:\Windows, that is admin dollar is nothing but a C:\Windows, and it has created a folder called CCM setup. Inside that it has dropped these two files. So after that what would happen is this MobileClient.tcf file will have the installation parameters. So for example, what is a site code, it has to use all of that information will be available, and it would use that TCF file to install the ConfigMgr client. So that's the key here, and once it is copied, it's gonna delete locked file. Okay, and now once this process is done, it is again gonna process DC01 because it has created one more file also. Okay, so on a best shot it is trying with one account. If that failed, it will try for other account. So in this case the operating system is 10, that is nothing but the 2019 or yeah, I think it's 2019. Then it is trying to again going for the admin dollar CCM setup, and these two files got copied and it is started the installation. Now if I go back to domain controller, so let me switch back to the domain controller. So I'm in domain controller, and if I go back to C:\Windows, and there's a folder called CCM setup, it got created. You see here, this is the TCF file. So let me actually paste it on a desktop to show you the command it has. So it will have all the information, for example, from where it has to download. This is a server, this is my management point, remote name is this is your SCCM client software which has, so this is the share. So you don't open here, but if you just go to the server sms_lab, it actually shared this client folder. There's a client folder, right? So this client folder got shared with this name SMS client. So that's why it is trying to connect. And then you don't see here, of course you might have a question, hey, why can't I see this? It has exclusively shared for computer accounts, so that's how it's shared. So I will show you that once I switch back to ConfigMgr server. But you can look at here FSP name, MP list, IS, ports, all of that configuration, including the certificate that it has to use. So client, it is going to install all the features with the site code as lab with the FSP command line. This is the TCF file configuration. It uses that file information and it has started installing. So if you wait for a couple of minutes, this installation process will complete, and then we should be able to see within the configuration manager console as a client has installed. So I'll just go back to the assets and compliances, and I might have to update the collection membership. Then it will show, if you see here, question mark is there on a CM01, but there's no question mark on DC01. And even client also changed to yes. That means the client is installed on CM01, which is the same machine. So let's refresh. So in a couple of minutes it will come up. So in between, if you want to see the interesting things, you can always go to control panel. As you know, system and security, open up this. You would be surprised to see not all the agents are in enabled state. You see it is installed but not enabled, and the actions are just the user policy and mission policy. There's nothing. And coming back to the site code, you have a site code but there's no actions, meaning there's no agents got enabled. If you remember, in my manual installation I did talked about hardware inventory agent was enabled state, but now here it is just the install, meaning it might take some time to actually come up the agent installed agent to become as an active agent. So it takes some time to change this status. So until that time we should be able to wait for a couple of minutes. And a ConfigMgr server, now the client got installed successfully. We could see here now the components also showing as the agent installed. At the same time, some of them are enabled. So in the console, it should be listed as completely with a green color. Yeah, it's showing as in a green, and client as yes option is also showing. Now I wanted to say that this is very smooth, right? Let's have some kind of troubleshooting issues so that it would be more fun, right? So if you see here, there's no client is installed still on domain controller. So let's try to work on that kind of a computer. So what I will be doing is I would be actually opening up a tools folder on a ConfigMgr server, copy the CM trace to desktop, open up this CM trace, okay, and open the log file from Windows CCM setup logs. Now you see here all the blood color, right? We like it. Now let's try to troubleshoot. What is this red color? It is actually indicating. So if you see here, all the time it is not able to get a DP location as expected from MP. So from MP it is not able to locate the DP, and it's not able to resolve. So let's have actually checked on it. Hey, can we actually able to reach? So if it is trying to open up the HTTP with FQDN name, it says that name not resolved. So if you see 80072EE7, this error indicates name resolution specific. How would I identify is simple. Go to the tools in the CM trace, error lookup, paste the error code, look up. It says that server name or address could not be resolved. Can we verify this? Let's go back. Oh, another error. So let's here. It says that this is a name, right? So this is a domain controller, and we still don't know. If we try to ping, it's able to ping. Nice. And let's look up. Yeah, it got the IP address. Still we have this problem. So this could be something related to the maybe it might require a reboot kind of thing, or ipconfig flash DNS that might resolve this problem. But you got the idea here. Let's do quickly ipconfig /flash DNS and register DNS, or wait for a couple of minutes to automatically resolve, because this is anyway running as a server service. So let's also open up services.msc and restart CCMSetup.exe file, because that way it's gonna restart this installation. Now it is able to resolve. You see here automatically it has resolved. I've not done anything much. It's all about the flushing the DNS. Somehow it has the old DNS record, something like that. I never restarted honestly on the domain control. That's the problem. That could be the one of the problem. Now you see here it's actually going on its own, automatically downloading and installing all of that required components. So that's good. So you got an idea what to be done. You see here it's actually processing automatically all the required files. Once it is installed everything, it will move eventually all the not required files, and it will delete that CCMSetup.exe specific service also, and it will create a new service called CCMExec specific command called SMS agent host. Now the client got installed. You could see here this service also goes automatically back if as soon as I refresh. A new service called SMS agent host service gets started, and all the related log files will be created, and also the installation gets created under CCM folder under logs. You could see here, and the first log file that you need to monitor would be the client ID manager. You could see that it is already approved, sending registration, and then it has registered, seems to be in the above. It waited here, it was pending, it was approved. This is where so client also automatically able to see here. If I just do here quick refresh, I should be able to see this question mark to automatically yes with a green option. So from here on, any machine that we onboard will get automatically client gets pushed out. So that's what it's going to do. So how did we configure? If I recap, select the server and the client installation, settings, client push, and we configure here these configuration. This is how we configure the entire steps. Okay, I hope this entire lecture is useful for you. Thank you for watching this. I would start some other lectures on the ConfigMgr if you all give some kind of support by liking this channel or this videos.